I don't think it's mutually exclusive to enjoy something for what it offers, while at the same time acknowledging its shortcomings and advocating for it to be better. I mean, you could give me a loaded hamburger with all the best toppings, and I'm absolutely going to devour it because who doesn't want a nice juicy hamburger? Yet that doesn't mean I can't believe that it wouldn't be even better as a cheeseburger and advocate for that. It's not mutually exclusive. I can absolutely smash the hamburger while thinking to myself, man, that really would have taken off if it had some cheese. And it's this mindset which I've always brought into Genshin Impact. To me, Genshin Impact is a marvelously juicy hamburger that's 100% good enough for me to eat as it is and be happy with it, but it's still missing some toppings that I believe could turn it from a satisfyingly great burger into one of, if not the best sandwiches I've ever had. That said, the good obviously outweighs the bad for me personally, as evidenced by my continued engagement with the game. That's not true for everyone. We're all interested in the games we play for a multitude of different reasons, and to varying degrees, but as far as how Genshin relates to myself and many others, I think it's fair to say that for a while now, some of the spark has been gone. Again, not that the game has been bad enough to turn me away, the good is there, but it's felt stagnant, unchanging. And in the few ways it has changed, it's debatable whether it has been in positive ways, with things such as more obvious power creep, regional gimmicks, and what many believe to be a weaker showing in the narration and story department in Natlan, in contrast to the Sumeru and Fontaine arcs that came before it. That all is until Nod Krai and 6.0, which I say because, and I'm just gonna out and say it, this is Genshin at its best. And I mean that wholeheartedly. I don't know if Genshin has felt this good since its launch. We are so back. The thing is, it has all the embellishments of modern Genshin while reigniting the flames of the past. It feels like this is what Genshin has been trying to build itself up to being, but it had neither the foundations or maturity to manifest. As far as the 6.0 story goes, yeah, it did kind of take a little bit of ramping up, but you would expect that with a new region. However, once it got going, it just never stopped. It's probably the longest stories we've had yet. I'm not sure of that, don't count me on that, but I think when you combined Act 1 and Act 2, yeah, it was several hours, and yet it didn't feel like we wasted any time. Yes, there was a lot of dialogue, it is Genshin Impact after all, but I feel like most of the dialogue had purpose. It was there for a reason, and the scenes jumped from one another pretty often. There was a lot of going here and seeing this and meeting that person and, actual gameplay too, which I feel like is really important for making us feel more like participants and not just observers. No, the game still doesn't have a skip button, which even today I say it should have, and Paimon is still the most talkative person in the room. But even so, the pacing and constant forward direction of the story was such that these things were not all that tiresome. As opposed to some of the other stories where I've felt the fatigue halfway through, I never felt fatigued enough to want to skip this one, even if the option did exist. And that's the difference. Hoyoverse has shown that they have looked at past story pacing in Genshin and streamlined it in such a way as to retain our attentions. I wasn't bored. I never mashed my way through a scene and told myself that I'd just look it up later. When a scene ended, when an act ended, when the story ended, it just ended. Before fatigue. Except for one little part. There was like this one sequence that occurred at the bar. There were a couple of bar sequences, but one in particular, I can't remember which one, but it felt like it dragged on just a little longer than it should. It was no Fortress of Mirrorpeed or anything, thank goodness, but I think the fact that that one instance did stand out like that to me, that's kind of an indirect statement about the rest. You know, I spent a whole 2 evenings after work completing Act 1 and Act 2, so considering that's the only slog I can think of, make of that what you will. I'll tell you 2 other things that really helped with enjoying the story though. One, Paimon's new voice actress really makes the character more pleasant to listen to. And that's no shade or anything thrown at the old voice actress. You know, bygones are bygones, okay. But yeah, I really do enjoy the new voice actress's Paimon voice way more than the last one, so that's a positive. And also, the fact that the Traveler speaks so much during this quest. I was actually shocked at how much Traveler spoke. Traveler has a voice? Really? Wow. No, seriously though. The Traveler speaks a lot now, and I really hope that this is going to be their ideal going forward, because it really brings you into the story, dude. Like, this is the Traveler. It's the character we're following. We want to hear them speak for themselves, and now we are. Now, the Traveler doesn't speak so much that it's like any other character. She still doesn't speak as much as Paimon even, but absolutely it's more than it ever has been. I feel like the Traveler spoke more in this quest than almost the rest of the game combined even. I just really want this to become the new standard. It makes it so much more enjoyable. Which I think that it helped that the Traveler themselves was actually looking for answers. Sure, there was the whole Nod Krai quest going on, yes, and it is tied to the Traveler and everything. It's not like it's irrelevant, but the Traveler was actively seeking answers to questions, particularly involving, like, the explicit mentions of their spaceship. Like, dude, okay, to me, the spaceship thing is iconic. Yes, we know that the Traveler is an extraterrestrial, but, like, seeing the spaceship really drives it home that we're talking about, yes, an actual stereotypical from another planet alien extraterrestrial being. Which isn't to say we didn't know that, we knew that, the same way that Skirk is an extraterrestrial, but I don't know, it's just something about seeing a ship, the vessel that we came to the planet on. I think that's kind of the overarching thing though with Nod Krai. That's kind of what feels so good, is that it is kind of just revisiting a lot of these things. We've circled back around to talking about the Traveler first stepping foot on Teyvat, while at the same time establishing their otherworldliness. And I do believe the more cosmic natures of the game are about to be opened up to us. We learned that Skirk was from a whole different world, and we learned about our spaceship back in 5.7, and now we've seen it with our own eyes, and we're talking about the moon beyond the fake skies, and the other moons as well. Like, we're getting cosmic, and again, I think this is for a reason. And that's because we're in such a late game that at some point I do believe we need to be getting used to the idea, or at least warming up to the idea, that we're not going to be on Teyvat forever. Now, I don't know when that's going to be. We do still have Snezhnaya, and we do have Conria and Celestia in these places, but yeah, I think that the cosmic natures are upon us so heavily because we are shifting scales in the game. It's not just a worldly game anymore. It's not about this continent or Teyvat, whatever it is. But yeah, it's about much more than that, and I think we're starting to see it. And the fact that they did it while staying Traveler focused is great. Especially when it comes to the Traveler's twin. I gotta say that they really played on their own absences. And what I mean by that is, the fact that the Traveler's twin has been so elusive and, you know, just all over the place, and we're always like 2 steps behind. Anytime we're with the traveler sibling or twin, we want to get as much out of those interactions as possible. So when we see our sibling and we catch up to them and we ask questions and we get some answers and we decide to go on a little adventure together, it's one of the coolest sequences ever. I mean, the entire time I'm just sitting there like, wow, I can't believe we're actually questing with our sibling. And it's not just their voice, like you're literally running next to them and questing together. That's so cool. You even have a competition to see who can take out the most enemies. Which, by the way, I lost because he stole my kill at the last I can't believe it. Either stole my kill anyway. But yeah. And then you're duped. And it was all just a ruse. Turns out it was the big bad all along, Rerear, but that sequence felt magical, dude, and Hoyoverse played on our senses of absence. It's almost as if it's an extension of the Traveler. I know I'm speaking for just myself here, but I think maybe many others as well. We want to see a connection established between the siblings, you know? And so, when this moment happened, the only thing I was thinking to myself was, wow, is this really how it's gonna be? Are we linked? Are we going to be doing these kinds of adventures together, maybe? From here on out? I don't know. You know, a lot of thoughts were going through my head at that time. We had never done nothing like that, and here we are, and the siblings are adventuring together. It really, really, really did make it seem like we were entering some new type of, alliance phase or something. And then they shattered it. This is so brilliant because they know that we've had 5 years in the game and we've been wanting to see this too. And they took it from us. What they did there was make us feel the Traveler's own disappointment. I believe Hoyoverse is pretty savvy. They know what's going on, and they know what their audience is wanting to see as well. When they did that, they knew they were going to make us disappointed too. Such a convincing sequence, and such a letdown at the end. What's so good about all this is that it brings the Traveler's own story into the forefront, while still making it a part of the overall picture. And it was done in such a way that tugged on our own emotions, especially considering the overall gameplay and story were great too. The cast of characters here are a varied cast, and I believe this is an example of ensemble storytelling done correctly. All of the characters felt like they had equal relevance to the overall story, and all of them were either given important story sequences or impactful or hype moments to solidify their stake. Lauma and Flynn's may have had a little more of a spotlight, but not by much. The likes of Nefer and Yehoda, and Aino and Inefa, they were all important for the movement of the story. Nefer's intelligence gathering sequences, Flynn's joint confrontation with us against Rerear, Yehoda's infiltration sequences, Lauma's tense walk through town, and Nefa's cool and heroic cutscene. Like, dude, every character had weight. The fact they fleshed them all out well enough for that weight to feel like it mattered was key to the overall enjoyment of the full ensemble. I will say that my very first thoughts on Yehoda was that she's forced. She just kind of came out of nowhere and she was dumped on us, but nope, nah. I quickly warmed up to her too when her relatability came to the forefront. Her infiltration sequence was nicely done, and I like her dual role of providing some comic relief while also grounding the scenes in realism. I mean, let's be real, the Traveler and the rest of the cast are getting into and doing some pretty insane things. A character like hers is a reminder that these tasks and feats are not the norm. People don't just go waltzing into strongholds or confronting harbingers. It's easy to forget those things when you have solidly courageous characters like the Traveler or Flynn's or Lauma, But dependable as Yehoda always is in the end, she's a bar which we can use to address story elements or beats that may be far-fetched. And yeah, speaking of harbingers, Columbina and Sandrone. Yep, perfect. Perfect. I'm happy with these characters. They couldn't be any more different. Well, I mean, one is an actual goddess, so there's that. But aside from that, one is very calm and quiet, and the other one is like loud and obnoxious and kind of mean. I do hope we get more interactions between these two though, because their dynamic is pretty good, and yeah, behind the veil, Columbina has some sass. There's some sass behind there. It's pretty funny. Yeah, I like it. And all of this has said nothing for gameplay and the world. On the heels of Fontaine's swimming mechanics and Natlan's Saurian and character-based mobility, Nod Krai feels like a return to the grounded roots that first defined the journey in the earlier regions. There are traversals here, but it's simpler. Kuhenki gliding is a thing, but it's universal, unlike Saurians and Natlan characters, which all have different situational and circumstantial use cases. Moon lanes are also a thing. Making these options universally accessible and uniform, yeah, it's a smart move, and keeping it simple definitely helps. No funky controls or anything, just uniform transformations that get us from point A to point B. Great. Aside from that, the rest of the gameplay in Nod Krai is pretty standard aside from the whole red and blue polarity thing, but that's more so puzzle based. I have to say though, while quote, pretty standard, end quote, might sound boring offhand, that is keeping in mind the departure from traditional gameplay that was Fontaine and Natlan. After 2 years of approaching the world in completely new ways, standard is not a bad descriptor. And I say that as someone who loved swimming and didn't feel terrible about the Saurians. They were cool and they had their time, but a fresh return to more OG design philosophies mixed with new age flair is welcome. Nod Krai is also just a really pretty region with distinct sections. Nothing too out of the ordinary for Genshin's visuals, but then again, as stated, there's nothing wrong with not being out of the ordinary. It's more pretty Genshin scenery, nothing else to really say. Although I will say, the bureau, dude, iconic. It's so massive and industrialized. It's the closest we've ever gotten to Fatui culture, and they knocked it out of the park. It drips with militant hierarchy and bureaucracy, and right here in the open world, it feels so sick to take the fight straight to them. Not as a patrol group, not as an encampment, but as an entire base of operations. It's a whole new militant scale that we've been building up to, just like the cosmic scale and the lore scale. Everything is scaling. Long past ideas that we could only dream of or imagine in our minds are manifesting in the story, world, and gameplay. And it's that idea that I follow with. Teyvat is beginning to actually feel like a smaller part of that larger cosmic scale. The Archons, which once felt like the pinnacle of power, are now starting to feel matched by entities such as the Sinners and likely soon to be the Mages of the Hexen Circle and also the Shades. Background lore is now coming to the front and branching into multiple directions as well, to the point it's hard to tell if we're fighting the Abyss or the Fatui or one of the Sinners or what. We're having continuations and deviations of what we ever assumed the story would even be on day one. All of those things are examples of this new scaling. The world and the lore of Genshin are bigger, and of course, even Teyvat. Look at it now compared to what it used to be, and it's actually kind of nuts. And not to be left out of the discussion, the gameplay is scaling as well. Enemies are more resilient and hit harder, still nothing to be too afraid of, but when it comes to endgame, the scaling is extremely apparent. Abyss and Theater are really challenging, and Stygian is a whole new beast, so much so that its highest levels aren't even viewed as realistic by like 95% of players. maybe 99%, I don't know, I'm just throwing a number out there, but the point is, everything in Genshin is feeling like a bigger, better version of what it has always been. QOLs and stuff help, but I'm more so talking about just the game itself. Nod Krai and 6.0 feels like Hoyoverse took the good things that worked in the past, mixed them with the new age flair, and created an experience that has built on everything we've been putting together so far. It feels kind of like this is what they intended Genshin to be, but needed time to build up to it because of all the stories and lore, and all the world building and all that's needed to make all this feel as huge as it does. Though, the amount of time needed to reach this point is absolutely questionable. They're the ones who decided to release major regions only once per year after all, but I don't know. I'd say there are arguments both for and against it, but either way it goes, the reality is that ramp up to the upcoming crescendo, it's been a long time coming. For some, such a wait is inexcusable. As I said at the outset of this video, we all play the games we choose for a variety of reasons, and our tolerances don't always align. I can't necessarily blame anyone who skipped out before we got to this point, just keeping it a buck. But I do think those who have been consistently interested in Genshin are currently being rewarded, and will continue to be rewarded as we get even deeper. Two things to establish there though. 1. I said those who have been consistently interested, and I make a distinction there. There are those who have left or slowed down on the game, but have kept their eyes open just in case things shift in a way that sparks their interests again. That's cool and all, but I do separate those players from players who never lost enough interest to leave in the first place. Not that there's anything wrong with leaving a game when it's not interesting you anymore. Of course not, never waste your time on anything that you're not feeling. But I'm just saying, I think the ones feeling the most rewarded right now are those who have just straight up been here, you know? And 2, even so, when I say the ones feeling the most rewarded are those who have been consistently interested, I still make a distinction here that doesn't mean players who have had no problems. We went over that already. These concepts are not mutually exclusive. Someone can have consistent interest over time and still have some problems with the game. Proof. It's me. I'm all the proof I need. Nod Krai feels like such a breath of fresh air and a return to form at the same time. It feels like they've learned a lot about what ticks with players and what doesn't, at least concerning story, pacing, and open world. Tighter stories, better pacing, action-focused, traveler-focused, non-gimmicky traversals. It's pretty fantastic. Does Genshin still have its issues? Yes, and I've covered them many times, but for what's here, Genshin feels better than it ever has. Characters are handled more maturely, plotlines are handled more responsibly. For instance, the Sergeant Major NPC, Sosi, we never really got to know them, and yet their murder lingered on and felt sufficiently weighty due to Flintz's sentiments. And yeah, just traversals handled more responsibly, expediency handled better. Even things like expressions and poses, with characters doing things like taking a seat and leaning on the shoulder of another, or helping one another to stand. Minor things in 2025, yes I know, but in Genshin's case, it's still a step up, even if modest. Like, the extra character animations is objectively not worse, even if minimal. Know what I mean? I guess what I'm saying is, for anyone who has teetered on the edge and left, or has lost interest, there's no guarantee this will re-spark that interest. But for anyone who has been here and hasn't teetered, I genuinely can't think of anything here that would make the experience worse for someone. Maybe there were mechanics in Fontaine and Natlan to turn teetering players off. I can't think of anything here to turn anyone off though, you know? It's just a better Genshin Impact, and the scaling in all parameters is finally rewarding investment. As we go deeper, I hope these trends continue. More traveler focus and speaking, more deep lore, more endgame adjustments, more optimizations, all of it. It's really the sum of these things on top of 6.0 and Nod Krai's great execution that feels so good right now. And I'm here for it. Been here for it, you know? Always have been. It's just now it's even better. Since they finally slapped some cheese on that burger.